Welcome, everybody, to Radicalized Truth Survives, where we got your back every single week. I'm Heidi Kuda. I'm here with High Fidelity and Sean Connor. Everybody's got different backgrounds right now. The two gentlemen just moved. I'm on a getaway with, thankfully in the desert at some friends, and wishing everybody a safe, healthy, happy 4th of July in a time of encroaching fascism. I wanted to open just to let you guys know what I'm spending my 4th of July in gratitude for you guys and Jim, because a year ago I was in the same place recovering from a broken heart. This work is not for the, weak of heart. And you guys made it all okay. So I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart that my Independence weekend is a celebration of the love I have with you guys, and how doing this work, I never feel lonely because you guys always have my back. And I just wanted to start right there. Truly love you dudes. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump right into Front Loaded.
Front Loaded.
All right. So thanks to our guest in episode 30, Monique Camara, who has a very hot Italian TV show called WTF. I got to be introduced to an Italian audience, 2-hour interview on Radicalized USA, and it was incredible. And her supporters actually are lovely, as opposed to trolling people who do this work. They actually were really lovely. What's funny is you see me wearing my I tried to be all French New Wave there, but I mean, like the things that people say were just so incredibly supportive, and we really got down. And Livia, her co-host, is absolutely incredibly smart. Those two met on Twitter. There are 2 women in Italy doing this kind of work, and there are very few people warning about the encroaching fascism. So please check it out. Go to Monique Camara, Camarra, and it's right there in her bio. And it's amazing to have 2 hours to kind of cross, to look at what's happening throughout the world with 2 women who are particularly as brilliant as they are. So that was amazing. Hi-Fi asked me to ask our friend Martin Scheel, former federal agent, what he thinks about the Enablers Act, which is legislation that is working its way through our House. And it's basically about forcing accountants and lawyers and art dealers to know where the money is coming from their clients. And why this is important is Marty says not only is he rooting for that bill to survive with all his life, it could actually destroy the GOP as we know it. So he says this is something to be taken very seriously. Unfortunately, like many things, it may die on the Hill, and Hi-Fi is going to talk a little bit about that in Word Phrase of the Week. The last thing I want to get into is I want to tell our viewers, and especially because we have such an incredible guest coming up, this is the time when tactics begin. I often go to a Banksy that's inspired me for a number of years now, showing a child, with a microphone, obviously a refugee child. From the moment despair ends, tactics begin. This is from this moment despair ends and tactics begin. We are going to be talking about calls to action. We're going to be talking about tactics. And one of the first things I want to tell you is that I have a friend who just got back from Australia. 91% of voters vote in Australia. You know why? Because of a $20 fine. If you don't vote, you get fined $20. If you don't pay that $20 fine, it escalates to $222. So everybody votes. We have 101 million people who sit it out. If we put a $20 fucking fine on their taxes, perhaps they would show up and participate in the salvation of democracy. So we're going to be talking about tactics. That's one call to action. Write to every congressperson and make them actually consider taking moves like that. Something so simple. It looks like Australians vote anyway, but something as simple as that could actually help in America.
I would like Election Day to be a national holiday where
Yes.
people don't work.
So
Yeah.
yes, that's right. Call to action, gentlemen. We want to see how we can get 101 million people to vote who did not vote in the previous election, and one of them is stick a $20 fine, on their taxes. Watch it escalate to 222, and watch some people get down to the polls and actually vote. So that is a perfect segue to Hi-Fi's word phrase of the week.
So our word phrase of the week this week is vitocracy. It's a combination of veto and democracy. And it was coined by the American political scientist Francis Fukuyama. And what this describes is right now, the United States is facing a crisis of governance because no single entity can acquire enough power to make decisions and make effective changes.
Right.
We have Mitch McConnell's obstruction of Supreme Court justice appointments.
Yes.
We know what that has led to.
Yes.
We have obstruction of all sorts of bills. We have a problem. We're not progressing. We are being obstructed, and it's very obvious who is obstructing the progress of this country.
Yes, go ahead, Sean.
It's like a bureaucratic stagnation. It's like the political version of the stagnant political enterprise. It's just non-moving, designed only to restrict and to pause, never to go forward.
Right. If anybody is wondering why Sean sounds echoey, he literally just moved into his new crib, and there's nothing there except some boxes and
linoleum and walls. Yeah.
It's interesting though, because the echo actually offsets the mumbling, so we can really hear you. It's kind of got a nice boom bass going, so it's actually helpful. Oh, I wish Jim was here. I know I said at the beginning it's 4th of July weekend. He's spending time with family, but we do miss him. But we are still going to have a Jim replacement, and it's going to be Jim replacing Jim. So I'm just teasing to that. Okay, so that's an important word to know. Vetocracy, veto and democracy combined. And let's jump right into why it matters.
Why? Matter. Why does it matter? Why high fidelity?
Now, I just need to say that Connor moved this weekend, and he still was able to produce that brilliant Why It Matters intro. OMG.
Oh, by the way, I just want to state something for the record. This is my father's hoarder office. This is not my place.
Well, we love your dad. We love your dad's hoarder office.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hey, he let me use it for this. So
yeah, he's great. Hi, Dad.
Why it matters. First story this week is we don't need no education. Yep, that's ripped off straight from Pink Floyd, but there's a reason I chose that headline, because the Arizona GOP has decided to completely destroy their public education system by passing the country's largest school voucher program. Mm-hmm. Every child who does not attend a public educational school will receive a $7,000 voucher, which can be spent on private schools, religious schools, homeschooling, supplies for homeschooling. And it's basically doing everything they can to gut money from the public education system, because as we have learned, one of the things that the Seven Mountain Dominionists take over is education.
Right. They need more. They need to be grooming more right-wing kids, because the Republicans are dying. And I use that word intentionally because I'm going to try to weaponize the words that they use against Democrats for them. That is a part of autocratic capture. Simone Gold was pushing that from America's frontline doctors, that micro schooling. And, I really hope it makes its way to the Supreme Court. Oops.
Yeah, that's not.
Yeah, that's not. Yeah. So
Wrong. Tricked again.
Yep.
So
Restriction of the educational system coming to a state near you. Enjoy it.
did we mention voting, kids? You know, did we mention voting? Most people, the majority of Americans, do not like this extremism. They don't like these people. It's a smaller percentage than the majority. So back to that 101 million, please, please do whatever you can to ensure we're going to see high numbers at the polls in all states. Arizona's been struggling to go blue, as you know. Arizona is one of the reasons that we have Biden in the White House. We can't lose hope for Arizona. All right, next up.
All right, next up, we're going to talk Russia, Russia, Russia. Yes, yes, yes. And the reason this story I'm using, of course, everybody says Russia, Russia, Russia. Well, it turns out that, yeah, Russia is still doing what they can to weaponize data against America.
Okay.
A Russian company called Target RU, who is under sanctions. They are owned by Sberbank, which is a Russian bank, which has been sanctioned for months now. Google was allowing Target RU to access Google user data for months and months after the sanctions came down.
Yeah.
Were they making money doing this?
Google was absolutely making money doing this. Yes.
Well, we have a infection with capitalism, I'd say.
Yes.
Well, we need to take to task these corporations that enable this kind of bullshit. I mean, they literally violated sanctions. I'm looking forward to some sort of punishment coming down, but I'm not holding my breath. But what really matters here, if we look at the Facebook hack, right? Cambridge Analytica. If we look at user data, let's talk about period tracker apps and user data, how that's going to be weaponized against women, right? If we look at Google user data being accessed, the author of the report stated that it was very, very likely that the Russian government had access to this data. They're using that to target Americans. Right?
We know that, yes. Well, two things, Hi-Fi. One is that I'm over the moon excited that our viewers are going to get to meet Jackie Singh, a cybersecurity expert who is probably the most badass woman I've ever met in my life. And I've met some pretty badass women, including Joan Jett's mother. That's how badass Jackie Singh is. But I really want to say that we talk on this show about a global summit, a treaty, a tech treaty. It can't happen fast enough. So I think that is going to be something that, again, when we talk about calls to action, we are going to have a list of things, probably something that we will put on, our website or on our YouTube, wording when we actually post an episode. So there are things that people can do. It's not always about, money or protesting. Sometimes it's literally calling your congressional people if they are not QAnon influenced and getting them to do some bold moves. So that's a really important story.
Well, Monique Kamara said it best. She said Russia is working on the weaponization of everything. And one part of that everything is our data, right?
Yeah, right.
Our data, the understanding of us as individuals is just as dangerous to the fabric of this country as a nuclear weapon.
That's right.
We have treaties for nukes. We need treaties for data.
That's
damn right.
Here's the thing, guys, is that the corporate sector has done this already for years, for decades. They figured out how to use this data, not to the same intent and nefarious degree that these foreign operations are, but they've been, the tracking of the period data apps, they've been doing that shit for 10 years with Facebook to do what? To sell their product, to sell their medical device, to influence women to make decisions about their bodies and their health. This stuff's been going on. It's just now to such an extreme weaponized extent that we're seeing, the different initiatives.
That's right, Sean. And as we're going to learn from Jackie, the coordinated activity to mind F America as well as other countries is something that most people are not quite aware of. We are really, really in a world of hurt, and this digital poison and this hacking of everyone's privacy, it has to be regulated. We are a country of laws still, and we need to start exercising that and seeing justice. So thank you for that. Want to move on to number 3, or do you have something else you want to say, Hi-Fi?
No, let's move on to number 3.
Let's do it. A Tale of Two Facebooks.
A Tale of Two Facebooks. All right, this is actually a combination of 2 stories this week. The first one comes from MIT Technology Review, and it deals with the fact that Facebook, when users have been looking for places to get treated for cancer treatments, information on chemotherapy, etc., Facebook has been bombarding those people with advertisements for basically snake oil, clinics that offer unproven treatments or treatments that have been disproven, ineffective treatments, some treatments that actually can cause physical harm. And Facebook is making money pushing these fake cancer treatments. So that's the first story of Facebook. The second Facebook is immediately after the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade. Facebook started banning and taking down advertisements for Plan B or morning after pills. They are removing data on abortion care.
So they basically goose-stepped to the Supreme Court decision. But, the echoes of World War II just, swirling in my head to the things that happened under, Nazism. I mean, it's just like, watch them fall in line. That is terrible, not surprising, but very important to keep people informed. And I think that brings us right to brief legal briefs.
It sure does, guys.
Brief legal briefs.
Okay.
A little palate cleanser. Sean's favorite pair of underwear.
Yeah. Speaking of holding these companies accountable, specifically Facebook, they recently settled a 10-year class action litigation against them for tracking individuals off Facebook. Okay, so this was I think this litigation went into the courts in 2010, and the past few years have been going through settlement. They did settle for $90 million, which is not even close to enough over a 10-year span of time. Now, this is it's somewhat of a success. It's an unfortunate event that they've continued to do these things in all areas of their data sort of aggregation and selling, as we talked about. This is one lawsuit that's going to take in 10 years. They probably spent more than $90 million defending this case, unfortunately. And the thing that's so frustrating is that every one of these settlements that you'll see, they all typically include this phrase, which is the defendant expressly denies any liability or wrongdoing whatsoever. So it's a rhetorical game that they play, where obviously they did something wrong or else they wouldn't settle. But written into the settlement is the public stance, so that they can say that we've done nothing wrong, right? That we deny any liability. So one step forward, 2 steps back. That's what we got for the brief legal briefs.
Thank you very much. And again, when Hi-Fi says, which he says at least once an episode, that the internet moves at the speed of the internet and justice moves at the speed of the 1800s, or as he now says, old white dudes, I think that would be a perfectly good example. And unfortunately, as you noted, with that settlement goes, no response, no liability. So,
no accountability for executives, right?
Mm-hmm.
No accountability for decision making, none whatsoever.
None.
Right.
Class. I don't know how large the class is, but class actions typically
right.
thinned out so much that individuals. Unfortunately, the attorneys make the most money in class actions.
Yeah. So people who've had major harms occur in their lives are going to get a check for $4.10 at the end of this. Yeah. Well, this is all very important stuff. These days are dire. We're going to keep bringing the news straight, no chaser. And I'm so excited because not only does Jackie Singh give our viewers some tough medicine, she also has some incredible solutions. So stay tuned for that. Jim can't be here today, but Jim is still going to be here today. So let's get right into Hellscape.
Jim Stewartsen's Hellscape. Oh, fuck.
Okay, so Jim, our friend, as we know, because we created a show around his research, is brilliant. And he ups his game every week. He is driven to push out the truth during a time of mass deception. And he started to do these videos recently. He did one for the January 6th committee, which was incredible. He's done them about the Supreme Court. But he did, I think, probably his best work in what we're going to see next. And this is basically taking a CNN story, and I don't know that we'll run all of it, but let's run a fair amount of it. He takes a CNN story and then intersperses what is missing from the story in a piece that he called CNN Almost Gets QAnon Right. So let's go ahead and take a look at that.
Well, another person lining up against Cassidy Hutchinson is the anonymous online poster Q, who...
Q is not a person. Q is a LARP, a live-action role-play character. It is not a person. When you say it's a person, it confuses people.
Whose completely absurd posts, which would be laughably cryptic and are actually never accurate, are at the heart of the QAnon conspiracy movement. After more than 18 months of silence, the Q account is back, and on Wednesday, it aimed its conspiracies toward Hutchinson. It's really too stupid to even show the posts of this Q person, but the post contained numerous cryptic questions and ended with asking, who is Cassidy Hutchinson, and trust the plan, which is a common Q catchphrase.
The cryptic clues are there to gamify the idea of propaganda. So you are presented with a mystery that doesn't actually have a solution, and so you are sent out into the world to either harm someone or to harm yourself by consuming a bunch of traumatic propaganda. I do have to say this last Q drop was pretty pathetic. It asked the question, what's a plant? Which leads one to wonder, do you trust the plant?
The Q stuff would be funny if it didn't actually have real-world consequences. The FBI says it's arrested more than 20 people involved in the Capitol riots who said they followed QAnon. One of those, probably most famously, Jacob Chansley, who was seen in face paint and a headdress in the Senate chamber on January 6th. He's since been sentenced to 41 months in prison.
Please stop bringing up this stupid-ass Chansley guy. He really is distracting. He's there to make a ridiculous face on a very serious phenomenon. If you want to look at somebody who was brought there by QAnon, look at Ashley Babbitt, who got shot dead.
There was also the follower who flashed the Q sign in his trial for allegedly killing a member of the Gambino crime family, and another who was sentenced to 8 years following an armed standoff near the Hoover Dam. That guy, he was demanding the release of a Justice Department report on Hillary Clinton's emails, which is a popular QAnon conspiracy.
Hillary Clinton's emails. Who was super interested in Hillary Clinton's emails? Mike Flynn. Mike Flynn was the guy who ran MAGA 3X, which ran all the operations around Hillary Clinton's emails, including Pizzagate, which you will get to later in this conversation.
I'm joined by CNN's Donny O'Sullivan, who's tracked QAnon and spoken to many of its followers over the years, and CNN senior law enforcement analyst Andrew McCabe, former FBI deputy director. What does it mean that now that the Q account is back up and running?
Yeah, I mean, Anderson, I think like among the kind of polite company here in Washington, D.C. and here in New York City, the conventional wisdom might be to say we should ignore it. It's stupid. It is dumb. It is objectively dumb. But what happened last time when folks weren't talking about that? Half the country then was wondering why did a ton of people wearing Q paraphernalia show up and storm the Capitol.
Also important to know that several people who went into the Capitol as violent terrorists called themselves digital soldiers, which was a term that was trademarked by Mike Flynn in 2016.
The reality,
there were a lot of people wearing Q stuff.
There was a lot of people. There was the shaman.
And Mike Flynn was selling Q paraphernalia.
It's part of a huge grift.
Okay, here's the dangerous and dumb part. Speaking of dumb, so we just got done talking about a whole bunch of stuff all of which is connected to Mike Flynn. And Mike Flynn comes up and suddenly he's a grifter, and it's all a grift. It's like there was some kind of, something that went off in their head that said Mike Flynn is a grifter. And the reason for that is because there are liars who are influencing the press to believe that Mike Flynn has really nothing to do with QAnon and he's just a grifter. That is nonsense. Mike Flynn, for all intents and purposes, is Q. There isn't a Q, remember, because it's a fucking LARP. But Mike Flynn is the guy who's been running it from the start. Please, figure it out. It's not difficult. Let's continue.
Look, there is obviously the crazy QAnon beliefs where it comes to cabals and everything else.
Drinking blood of children, blah,
yes,
blah,
blah. But it's part...
It's important to understand that the core QAnon beliefs are Russian propaganda. It's based on the protocols of the Elders of Zion, which uses children and blood drinking and cannibals and all the same shit that QAnon is using. It's Russian propaganda mixed with political violence.
It's part of just kind of a tapestry, a range of conspiratorial beliefs, which many parts of the Republican Party now believe, everything from lies about the election all the way up.
So we're failing here to make an important connection, which is that the reason Q quit last time and hasn't been around for 18 months is because it switched to the big lie. Ron Watkins, who ran the website
right there.
Q was on, by the way, not fucking Q, Ron Watkins switched over to be big lie propaganda full time, and the entire cult basically sat in chat rooms and looked at people, holding ballots up to ultraviolet light and shit. That it just switched QAnon to the big lie. We have to get that straight.
All the way up to QAnon, and it kind of all goes hand in hand. I think what we're going to see is that this account, this phantom poster online, could actually play a role in upcoming Republican primaries and could cause a bit of chaos in the midterms as well when it comes to the Republican side of things.
It does seem interesting that just as the former president is coming under serious criticism after Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony, the Q account pops back up, raising questions about Cassidy Hutchinson.
Yeah.
It's really not mysterious why Q went after Cassidy Hutchinson. She's the one who said that Mark Meadows, who spoke to the president all day long, also spoke to Roger Stone and Mike Flynn on January 5th. They also made a big deal about the fact that he had conversations with people on January 6th that Cassidy Hutchinson was not allowed to listen in on. There's a strong inference that the people in that car were Roger Stone and or Mike Flynn. So the reason why Q, who is Mike Flynn's alter ego, the reason why Q is going after Cassidy Hutchinson is because she is an existential threat to him and his entire operation.
Yeah, Q had not posted since December of 2020, so right after Trump won the election. Remember, Q was promising
Lost the election.
Lost the election.
Said he won the election.
That is going to drive the QAnon people crazy.
Yes.
So
right there, you will now be the subject, as if you haven't been already.
But he has not posted since December of 2020. Came back a few hours after the Roe decision.
So guess who else came out a few hours?
I don't know, it's lagging so much, guys. Sorry. So right here.
70s. A very specific and nasty bit of propaganda. And both Mike Flynn and Q said basically the same exact thing.
And like we saw, mentioned Cassie Hutchinson by name, called her out, and what we have seen in the past when Q calls out someone, they become harassed, as you know yourself.
Right. In fact, I spoke with QAnon followers for a special report that we did last year. Just listen to this guy.
Anderson, I respect you, but when you say this guy like that, it's demeaning to somebody who is doing something extremely difficult, which is extricating themselves out of a cult and speaking out about it. So his name is Jitarth, and he's a very brave and kind person.
Did you at the time believe that high-level Democrats and celebrities were worshiping Satan, drinking the blood of children?
Anderson, I thought you did that, and I would like to apologize for that right now.
Was it something about me that made you think that?
It's because Q specifically mentioned you, and he mentioned you very early on. He mentioned you by name.
Andrew, what is the significance of Q mentioning Hutchinson, and what could be, you think, real world consequences?
That's right.
Sure. So, as you and Donnie have already summarized, there is no significance to the post beyond the fact that he included her name specifically. And it's not because he said anything logical or factual. It's just the existence of her name in that post turns her into a target for people who subscribe to these beliefs. And as you know, Anderson, the posts are deliberately vague. They're inane. They just raise questions that cannot possibly be answered. And then to throw her name into that conspiratorial milieu is very, very damaging to her in terms of the attention it will bring from people who believe in who knows which one of the QAnon conspiracies.
Right, Andrew.
Context. All of this is based on Gamergate, which is a misogynistic cult that was started on 4chan and then went to 8chan and was led by Frederick Brennan, who happens to be a source for a bunch of journalists around who listen to him. And one of the things he says, and the group of people around him, is that Flynn is just a grifter. So let's be really clear. This bullshit that Flynn just happened to be around when Q started and just happened to make some money from it, that comes from the people who helped start all of this. Gamergate was started by Frederick Brennan, and it was about harassing women. That's what it was about. And then it turned into Pizzagate, and that turned into QAnon.
So before anybody says anything, I just want to point out one thing. You know who is brave and kind? Jim Stewartson. Thank you for doing this work, brother.
I have one thing to say about that whole clip there. They kind of trivialized, oh yeah, this one guy flashed a Q and then shot a gangster. No, there are at least 5 children who were killed by their parents because of QAnon. So don't fucking make light of it.
Yes, this is a war. This is war. And I'm very glad that Jim is on our side doing this kind of work. Sean, what say you?
Yeah, it was. I usually like Anderson Cooper, but that was incredibly flippant and sort of, I think in a way it was a strange report because it was so dismissive, that it sort of undercut you and his guest who he had on talking as an expert, was sort of undercut the whole time. And it's obviously, it was a very serious concept that infected so many people, and we're seeing the ramifications of it play out again with Marjorie Taylor Greene and the rest of these people.
Oh my God. Yeah.
It's not a game.
It's not a silly theory that crazy people believe anymore. It's not.
No.
I'm just grateful that Jim is doing this work, and that was hellscape. And before we get to our guest, I just want to say that in between that piece that he did, he's done an incredible, Insurrection Plan B Part 5, showing Chris Miller's role in this. And he also did an amazing probe of monkeypox today. And it's like Jim is just doing the work that I think the networks are afraid to do or don't have the capacity to do, which is why we have this show. And that said, we are going to introduce now Jackie Singh. Hi-Fi is going to have to dip out for a minute because he's got some fireworks with his kids, but he's going to be right back. Let's bring on our guest. Oh, we are so happy to see you here, Jackie. Jackie is a cybersecurity expert. She has a lot of knowledge. I am so blown away at just how much I learned in our pre-interview last night. And Jackie Singh, can you please tell our viewers a bit about your background?
Oh, thank you so much for having me. So my name is Jackie Singh. I'm the Director of Technology at an anti-surveillance nonprofit organization based in New York City. And the majority of my work today focuses on fighting against the government use of mass surveillance. And so we fight to abolish that. And my most recent job prior to that was working on the Biden campaign in 2020 as an incident responder and a threat expert.
Wonderful. And Hi-Fi, who will be joining us, he's got some fireworks shenanigans with his kids right now. He will be joining us as soon as he can. He has been wanting you to come on the show. He is a data guy. He surfs in the data stream. He's always collecting information. And as a young person, he was a terrible troll, self-proclaimed. Then he grew up, had a family, and he started looking and seeing a lot of the online harms that were occurring and a lot of the things that were happening to his friends like Jim and me, our mutual friend Jim Stewartson. And we noticed as we've all been sort of fighting the fight for truth to see sunlight and really for democracy to continue beyond November, we've had so many of the same single purpose and multi-purpose hate accounts targeting many of our friends. And I noticed that some of this has sort of come your way. And what have you observed, and what can you say about those accounts that are causing online harms?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is that the Pareto principle absolutely applies here. You're looking at 20% of the actors who create 80% of the harms. I think that the same people recirculate, and we see the same people pop up again and again, right? Where we see a new incident come up, right? Someone's upset, someone's being harassed off the internet. Someone, often a prominent woman of color, is being just terrorized. Right. And they're being terrorized using the internet. There isn't a great solution. What do? Do you report it to social media? Do you report it to the FBI? Do you report it to the cops? I mean, you're talking about law enforcement that doesn't have the capabilities and the resources to really deal with much of the stuff that happens out on the streets, much less out on the cyber streets. Right. So we're seeing a lot of these same actors pop up again and again, and there doesn't seem to be a methodology for handling them. Right. From a law enforcement perspective, it looks like whack-a-mole. And so they haul them in when they can, when there's a reason to. I'm thinking of one in particular who was brought in for threatening a federal agent. And he was incarcerated for several years for this, and now recently released. And he's back out on the streets harassing and threatening and, being very aggressive on the internet again. And so I really want to know what the solution is for these types of things.
So, I have a small litigation support firm, and we did some of the Facebook content moderator lawsuits before we went to a class action. And that was a very frustrating thing, was to see this sort of the lack of the combined work effort between Facebook and law enforcement, even in cases of grooming or, in the horrible cases of CP and things like that. There just was no real relationship that they'd established with law enforcement. And that the content moderators were forever frustrated in the fact that they were having to jump through hoops to get anyone's attention. And I think, a lot of this responsibility does fall on the platforms, for getting a new metric for what they deem as successful or what they deem as engagement. It's been a very, very slow process, unfortunately.
Well, Jackie said, go ahead.
Oh, no, Heidi, please.
Well, you said some really important things last night when I was chatting with you. One of them is that we have to start viewing these bad actors as domestic terrorists because they are causing terror. I think that's a very important point. And also, I think that there's been I think it's been underestimated just how coordinated this effort is to do Twitter assassinations, to target to go after various people and traumatize them. And for example, this is a very small example, but my heart means something to me. Right before we started recording, I was sent something written about me, written about Jim, very derogatory. And I go from being very excited that we're going to be interviewing Jackie to being like in mourning again for how harmed my psyche is continuously. I have tools and a way to rebound from it, but I think we've underestimated how coordinated it is. and how psychologically traumatizing it is.
Absolutely. I think there's a total disconnect between the folks who manage these platforms and the folks who are using the platforms, and on the other end of these harms. I've come to realize after leaving the corporate world and focusing on the needs and interests of corporations when it comes to cybersecurity, right?
Yeah.
And now finding myself in the nonprofit space, I'm finding that people have completely different cybersecurity needs, right? In many ways, they can be aligned to what corporations want and need, but not often. Right? It just feels like most of the technologists in the world are working on cyber solutions for corporations and not for people. And so that tends to kind of skew what we even consider to be a cyber incident, right?
Right.
We're so focused as information security professionals, right? As folks who are responsible for taking care of organizations, that we again fail to make the connection between the lack of interest in the defensive solutions that are there to protect people and the outcomes. There's a total lack of realization there, as well as just kind of there isn't really a good understanding of what responsibility people in the tech industry have to the technology industry, to the tech community, to the users at large that use these products and services. And so we're really in a new place, I think, in the world in terms of the scope and scale of these platforms and how they're able to affect us, and the ways that we think about these platforms are going to have to change as a result, right? And so we have trust and safety at a platform is completely different from cybersecurity at a platform, which is totally different from corporate security at a platform, right? All of these things are very different. And again, all of these goals that corporations have to protect their platforms are not geared necessarily towards protecting users. It's a side effect, right? We have to reduce the risk to Twitter as a brand, and that's why we protect users. We don't protect users because it's our intrinsic motivation to do.
That's great.
Wow.
Could you give an example, maybe, of the difference between the corporate cyber security initiative and an individual cybersecurity initiative?
So I interviewed at a very large financial organization just prior to joining the Biden campaign. And this organization had hired the former chief information security officer at ICE, right, and at Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, and had been an assistant CISO at DHS overall. And so I actually didn't know this about him when I got on the call, and the role was I was interviewing for a director level role to come in and do insider threat monitoring and some other things there, right? And so when you think about insider threat monitoring, what does that really mean, right? You're thinking about folks who have some level of access, who are trusted insiders in some way, whether they're a partner of the organization or an employee, and they have some kind of nefarious interest or purpose, right?
Yeah.
But as a cybersecurity professional, it never dawned on me that those people that the corporation might deem a threat could be a union organizer.
Sure.
Right? It could be a unionizer at the organization, right? It could just simply be folks talking about advocating for themselves. And so when I joined this nonprofit, where I work and was really focused on understanding the outcomes of surveillance and what are we able to understand about the start of data collection and the end of data collection. What does it actually result in? What are the second and third order level effects that result from that initial data collection? And I was on a phone call where we were talking about a particular Amazon warehouse where these warehouse workers were essentially being surveilled to within an inch of their lives, because that's how it works and that's what they do.
Yeah.
And when people are maybe too close to each other, they spend too much time talking to each other on the warehouse floor. Maybe they use the computer that's provided by Amazon to go to the whistleblowing site, the Amazon whistleblowing site, or maybe some state OIG or something. Just there are so many different ways to dovetail that cybersecurity mission right into a human rights harming mission, right?
Yes.
That corporate security mission, which really is that risk management function of the organization. When it comes down to it, in a capitalistic society, a company wants to protect itself. It wants to protect its bottom line. It wants to protect its own right to exist. We've allowed corporations to become people, which
Yeah.
which has really given them a lot. We've allowed
Yeah.
corporations to pretend to be people as brands, right?
Yes.
To have a
Right.
portmanteau, to become people,
Yes.
to have a personality, to have a mind of their own. And so we've kind of created the separation between corporations and the people who run them, which I think is ultimately kind of skewing a lot of things in our society. But just
Yes.
in my little world of information security, you know, what I'm seeing is a lot of surveillance that is being collected with the intent of protecting people. And then a whole lot of outcomes on the other side of that, which are completely disconnected from that intent.
So I have a friend who works in the financial sector. She says all of the attacks that are always coming toward her particular firm are always coming from Russia, and that she has to have like 5 different ways to get into her system. And so I'm very curious, in your work and in your space, what kind of, you know, interference you see as a cybersecurity expert from Russia. This is a theme that we have. You know, we are an investigative show about disinformation. We have identified a 5th column in America. We have seen the impacts on the far left and the far right and the divisions in our country that really started, you know, 6 years ago in our country in earnest, and a couple of years prior to that. And I'm just curious what your observations are there.
Yeah, so something I really want people to understand, and it's not something that is immediately obvious, but as a threat analyst in the field of information security, it is commonly known, common knowledge. But the reality is that there are entire rooms and buildings full of people whose job it is to find ways to fool us, to look for psychological leverage, to identify the news stories that can be modified to fit a certain narrative, that can be, you know, like their job is to do this. They sit in buildings full of people every day, and the reality is that none of us individually stand a chance against the cognitive onslaught that's being thrown at us, and not just from entities like Russia, right? And so for readers, or excuse me, for listeners and viewers of the program, I urge you to go take a look at the APT1 report. APT1. This was a report that was produced by a company that I used to work for called Mandiant. They were recently purchased by Google. They're an information security firm with Air Force intelligence background. And they released a report in 2013 that was really seismic in the cybersecurity industry, because it went into detail about a unit of the Chinese military called Unit 61398. And this organization was profiled by these forensic analysts down to the building where they work in China, the city, what the building looks like, pictures from the outside, folks walking in and out, and really had a great picture of what these operations look like. And this was in 2013. So it started to kind of peel back the layers for regular people to understand that these are really complex operations.
Wow.
Right? That have a lot of money and resourcing behind them. And so it can be really difficult to try to get your footing in an information environment where you're just not sure what you're actually looking at. Right. And if you're just a regular person and you're on the internet and you're just looking at text and you're just assuming that everything you're seeing is more or less real, because why wouldn't you? Right. Well, everything else we see in the world is real. When we walk outside our house, we see cars driving down the highway, right? That's real. Right. And so it can be really difficult, cognitively speaking, almost like, as a mom, I bring the analogy of my 8-year-old learning about the difference between reality and fantasy. Right. She's still really confused and having a hard time understanding. Okay, well, Harry Potter, okay, no one really has magic powers.
Right.
And so when I try to maybe have the discussion with like someone like my mom, who's like the litmus test for all boomers in America, for me personally, I explain this stuff to her, and I say, look, there are entire networks of coordinated and authentic accounts that are just on the network to cause us to believe, that are interacting with each other in a way that causes us to believe that real citizens are having these conversations about these topics, the way that they're being presented. And so over the years, it's been years of this onslaught of every day people being manipulated to believe something and it stacks up. It stacks and stacks and stacks and stacks. It's
Thousand
one
little
story.
cuts.
Yeah, that's right. That's the exact analogy I used with Heidi yesterday on the phone. It's just a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here. And because of the news cycle, the 24-hour news cycle, because they've learned how to take advantage of the media in that 24-hour news cycle, because they've learned to take advantage of the both sides, right? The way that journalists in the United States try to be so unbiased as to present both sides, that we end up in a situation where we're on information overload. If someone can't cut through the noise and just say, hey, Ron DeSantis is trying to bring about theocratic education in Florida, right? Yeah. I read an entire Tampa Bay Times article 2 nights ago, and for the life of me, I mean, the name Coke sticks out because they're paying Coke network companies, a company that was founded by one of the Koch brothers, to review some of this educational material and to train teachers in Florida. But, you know, there's so many layers of facts that are in this story that the journalists writing it are so deep inside the understanding of what it is that they're reporting on that they don't even realize just how little the points that they're trying to make are actually getting through to the people who are reading this, because they're not in that media environment every day.
That's
they don't have the
Right.
They just don't have the layers and layers of history that you need to have, the factual history that you need to have to be able to start to put these things together in a way that makes sense versus
that is right.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Not every day.
As a lifer, investigative reporter for most of my career, and a lot of that on actually a local news station that was a Fox affiliate. We were left alone for a long time. I had great mentors, and I did a lot of undercover work, and I knew that our viewers needed to know whatever the information was, but that they would not have the opportunity to have all the complete backstory. And it was my job to get at the truth as simply as possible so they could walk away and go, oh my God, Best Buy is ripping people off with magazine subscriptions at checkout that they say are free, but they're doing a negative option, whatever it was. And so that was my job. And of course, by the time I got out of broadcast news in 2013, there was, we used to have an entire floor of investigative reporters, or entire half floor. There was 2 left. I was one of them. I was gone. The other one, didn't survive. And so every news show would start with the entertainment woman behind the scenes at American Idol or whatever. And that was going to be the breaking news, or it was going to be some, if it bleeds, it leads shootout, in Los Angeles. But it decayed. And then 2016 came. And after they'd shut down all the investigative units, up came some investigative units that I looked at with a real jaundiced eye. I was very suspicious. And it turns out I was right, because they certainly weren't working to get at truth for the people. Many of them were various ops in their own right. And so Americans have not been informed for many, many years. There isn't that source they can go to and say, oh, we have a shared narrative now. We do not have a shared narrative. And what you just described are also the foreign, interference campaigns, multi-countries going after our psyche and dividing what could have been a shared narrative of truth. So you just really hit a nerve.
Well, I mean, Fox News really helps that happen. High five.
That's right.
Yeah. I think one of the most unfortunate things we've seen is the corporate initiatives aligning with some of the foreign actors, right? So Fox has shifted toward a monetization of this sort of content. And so there's a financial motive for them to host these individuals, host the Tucker Carlsons of the world, and host Go ahead.
And yet, when 75% or whatever of the media is owned by Rupert Murdoch in Australia, and yet 91% of the people come out to vote because they came out with a very easy trick. And their trick was, you're going to get a fine if you do not show up at the polls. It'll start as $20, but it goes up to 222. In America, we don't have that. We are decaying into the wild, wild west. And we talked a little bit about this last night. Because we have not looked at our past in any honest way, we are really having trouble moving forward, and we're very vulnerable to these bad actors.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned, Sean, you mentioned Tucker Carlson. I mean, where is the Tucker Carlson for good, right? Where is the person who can weaponize all of these psychological tactics? Because that's really what he does, right? Every single one of his shows is essentially a masterclass in exactly what it is that he does and the style that he does it in. And I have no doubt they have a team of psychologists who advise them on exactly how to present their material, how he should be narrating his material, exactly how to, right? This isn't.
The New York Times had that amazing piece where they, like, by minute per minute, they did the data analysis on that.
Yes.
And it's not haphazard, right? This stuff is very, very well thought out. There's a purpose behind the message.
Very insidious.
Oh, absolutely.
In the way that he builds his content in his show. I mean, I've tried to watch it. It's very, you get into his rhythm, and you get into his meter and his timing. It's very,
oh,
very
absolutely. Absolutely. Look, in the military, I learned about BLUF, right? When you're writing an email, when you're creating a report, put bottom line up front at the very top of your email, because you need to summarize exactly what the heck that thing is about. And so when I go to this Tampa Bay Times piece and I start at the top, they didn't quite bury the lead, but I still don't even really understand the entire gist of the article without like spending 2 hours really absorbing the material and researching references. And it's like, look, the average citizen does not have the time for that. Bottom line up front, what is actually happening in Florida? And why is it that Tampa Bay Times can't actually tell us? Well, the governor of Florida is very powerful, right? This is the same with any reporter, with any industry or center of power, right? Like we see with big tech now, where it's really difficult for reporters to put things out about big tech that are negative unless it's extremely well researched, super duper tight, has been reviewed by legal. Everybody agrees that they can't sue us for this, right? That's really the situation that journalists are in. And so they have to be really careful about how they operate. And to be totally frank, a DeSantis America would be an America without press freedom.
Yeah. Right.
That's what some of these people want, and that's the future they're going towards. And it's really tough to see the media fall in lockstep with that. And instead of fighting back, you know what I mean? Instead of fighting back, I see these editors just kind of capitulating. What's that about?
That's right. That's right.
Well, when they do fight, I mean, look at what happened between what was it, the Washington Post and Project Veritas, and the release of their records, right?
Well, when media is corporate owned, and this has been an erosion since the 80s, since I got out of J school, there's been less and less and less of an incentive to actually fight the good fight. And the media, of course, normalized the autocratic capture that we have been enduring for the last half dozen years. And we had a president who was under contract to NBC, and NBC's head then went to CNN, and it is a very, and across the country there are so many journalism deserts where the mom and pops don't even exist anymore, so they're being fed poison on the radio, on AM radio, from shows that are owned by the Sinclairs, who then are pushing the CNP talking points. So, and then of course, this show talks a lot about the digital poison that people are receiving through their computers.
Coordinated digital poison.
Thank you for that. And that
is the key, right?
Yes. And I would like to hit on the coordinated a little bit more, because again, the actors that have been going after Jim Stewartson also went after Amber Heard, also went after Rebecca Jones, and they seem to move their targets. And to me, that does not seem organic. That to me seems to be coordinated, if not paid operations, likely related to some of the people that we have been seeing top down really trying to go after democracy.
Yeah. You'll see a report by Chris Bing and Raphael Satter in Reuters in the last couple of days about a hack for hire firm called Beltrox. I think it would be good for people to read about that because it really helps illustrate that there is an entire world of underground hacking that is hacking for hire that is out there. The Internet Research Agency, obviously in Russia, is a well-known coordinated troll farm that we know about. They exist. They exist. They're out there. They want to be paid. They have a financial incentive.
Yeah.
India has a really, really hard time with just operational control of the people that it has, right? There are so many people in India, and there are so many technically literate people in India.
Yes.
And there are so many hackers in India, right? And you're talking about a country in poverty. So they would certainly have a very, very strong incentive to do anything that they can, whether that's scamming Americans or, becoming involved in a more sophisticated hack for hire operation, right? It's pretty common at this point.
And we've seen that in the Philippines as well. And we don't know if it's true, but somebody sent our team a list of our names and our friends' names, people that we know and affiliate with, and a price sheet in the Philippines. And judging by my research, it's not beyond the realm of possibility that this was actually legitimate, because there are many, many marketing firms in the Philippines, according to their own investigative reporters, that just exist to actually attack the characters of people and disparage the characters of those. Many of them are reporters or independent researchers. So
yes, absolutely. And it makes sense to run these campaigns from overseas, right?
Yes,
it just
does.
makes sense. If I'm an American who wants to buy one of these campaigns, it is absolutely in my best interest to run it from a non-Western country that is, like India. It really is the perfect mix, because there's so many people. It's so hard to find people. It would be extradition isn't going to happen. Right? Prosecution isn't going to happen. So even in the case of Beltrox, where you have a total doxing, right, by the media of these individuals who are involved in coordinated and authentic daily harms to people around the world for hire, you just kind of you just come to realize that platforms have to do something. And platforms have to do something, because they are the ones who have the visibility over this, right?
That's right.
The fact that Reuters was even able to put this together, the article really talks about how, it shows the old-fashioned investigative journalism that went into doing the work, and just the amount of footwork that went into it. But realistically speaking, the platforms are the ones that have the information needed to detect these bad actors.
Right.
They know who these bad actors are, and they're not doing anything about it, right? Jack Posobiec has a freaking blue check on Twitter. This guy is a known traitor. He's a traitor, right? In another era, he would have been hung already. I can't, it's incredible that this guy gets to essentially
firing squad. I'm going for firing squad.
I mean, it's just, I don't want to advocate for anyone's death, but what I would like to advocate for is for justice. Yes. Is for there to be some form of freaking justice that we can apply to people who are openly seditious, right? Who are involved in conspiracies that directly relate to the overthrow of the U.S. government, and they're doing so like with that steady drip, that 10,000 death by 10,000 cuts, right?
That's right.
I don't think we're going to put a stop to this until some of these bad actors pay the ultimate price, though. I think it's going to keep growing and growing and growing until we put the smack down and tell people no.
Yeah, this is
I
what
think
happens
regular
when you do
prosecution
it.
works. I think regular prosecution works. I mean, look, ransomware, for example, right? American and just Western companies, hospitals, schools getting ransomware. Essentially, for folks who aren't familiar, it just means that part of your network might not be responsive. Your entire computer network might go down, and you have to either buy new computers or pay a ransom to these extortionists, essentially. And so most of those ransomware schemes were being run out of Russia with the explicit kind of approval of Vladimir Putin. And so prior to the invasion of Ukraine, Putin actually arrested a ransomware gang in Russia. And it was the first time that they had essentially been put on notice in any way. And so implicitly it was, if you hack non-Eastern, non-former Soviet bloc countries, you just kind of stay away from our little area here, and you do stuff over there, I really don't care. That's none of my business. But Putin decided to rein them in, and it was total chaos on the ransomware forums. If you went to go look at the dark web, and all these actors talking about it, just like confused and concerned and afraid.
Yeah.
But it had an effect, because ransomware is down. Right. They're not functioning. They're not out there just kind of doing whatever. And so I think I think that there are many countries out there that implicitly allow these operations. I think the U.S. government and really all the intel agencies around the world know who these bad actors are. Again, the 20% of bad actors are responsible for 80% of the pain around the world and all the platforms. So it's really just a matter of the people kind of standing up and saying enough is enough. We don't want this anymore. But in order to be able to do that, we need the transparency from the platform to say, here's what's going on. And right now, these platforms are not accountable to us.
No, they are not.
They are not accountable to freaking anybody. They're not even accountable to the FTC.
That's
right. What's Lena Khan at the FTC doing? I don't know. I'm waiting for antitrust action. Right.
Yeah.
They continue to take antitrust action. Apple lies to us on a regular basis about privacy, for example. They tell us that they're improving our privacy. No, they're building a better walled garden for themselves.
Yeah.
Right. Data for us, but not for anybody else. And we're going to keep it safe. So don't worry about us. We're your best friend. We're Apple. Right. And so there's just a lot of that. It's just a compendium of bad actions on top of each other, creating more and more centralized power. And until all of us kind of decide like, okay, enough is enough, it's going to continue.
That's right.
One of the things I say on this show a lot is the internet moves at the speed of the internet. Our regulation moves at the speed of old white dudes. And
right. Don't say that when she's having something to drink.
Sorry. No spit take.
So one thing that I'm trying to train myself to do, and I've really been working hard on this in the last week, and I'm not always succeeding, but I have been studying the St. Petersburg operation in depth for many years, and I no longer, because we're in an information war and our words on the side of truth tend to be weak, words like special interest and meddling and whatever, I'm no longer going to refer to the St. Petersburg operation as a troll farm, because 250 people were working 12-hour shifts to subvert our democracy. It was a large-scale subversion operation, and those are the types of words that I'm going to use now. Every single one of those people had to have 10 Twitter accounts, 6 Facebook accounts, and they had to meet massive quotas daily.
I mean, Americans would be shocked to really know what that looks like and to walk into one of these places and see what actually goes on.
Oh my God.
Any of us would, right? It's freaking disgusting.
Yeah.
It's disgusting. And then you have these platforms that are American companies, that are Silicon Valley companies that exist at the pleasure of the American people.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Public companies.
Yes.
With Russian financing.
With a lot of Russian financing. Well, we had a subversion operation in Arizona that was just determined around the corruption of spreading the Stop the Steal information, and they were teenagers being paid to write this stuff. And as people who watch our show know, things like Stop the Steal are merely covers for corruption. These are not actually the words don't mean what they say they are. These are phrases by propagandists that are, actual cover for corruption. So I always believe if we have a better arsenal of words, and if we do a few things, it's not impossible. We see other countries defending their freedom by shutting down, the digital poison operations.
So real quick, Heidi, I was going to jump in. So Jackie, earlier you mentioned that there's not a left version of the Tucker Carlson, right? There's not that voice, that unifying individual. We'll talk about Jon Stewart in a second. However, I did see the sort of one theory of hope for the midterms and for this election is the fact that Rush Limbaugh will no longer be out in front pushing for the far right.
But Steve Bannon's there and Alex Jones is there. We got to deplatform them too. But yes, you're right.
My point was that it seems like there's this feeder system in the right of voices sort of vying for that top slot. And the left, it seems like it's once in a blue moon that someone like Jon Stewart comes out and really catches the sort of the left, the liberal sort of zeitgeist, if you will. And I wonder, if there's anything to that. Like why is there obviously such a difference between the unified
personality? Personality, right? What are the big 5 personality traits related to republicanism? What are the big 5 personality traits related to liberalism, right? There's a tendency to love strong men, right? On the Republican side, right? There's a tendency to love that bombastic type of reality star. And what he did was he turned our country into reality freaking TV. Right. And Russia saw their opportunity to do that. And they said, hell yeah, that's exactly what we're going to do, because that's chaos, that's destruction. And we're just going to keep pumping that chaos and destruction. And they laid the groundwork. Now all they have to do is keep it moving, because they awakened these this racial hatred, this hatred of LGBTQ, right? All they awakened these hatreds. And they knew exactly how to awaken these hatreds, right? Maybe the gays are kind of passe. We got past them in the 80s and the 90s. We had the AIDS scare, right? HIV. Everyone learned about gay people at that time, so it's almost like they're a little passe. So we're going to move on to trans people,
right?
Because they're the new scary people, right? Literally 1% of the population is weaponized, abused. The people who are already marginalized and treated like crap in our society. On top of that, they're being abused because these people don't care, right? Their goals are to foment division, hatred, and chaos. And the way to do that is to take the stuff that the American people know the least about and to put it right in front of their faces and say, this is going to change your way of life. This is ruining your family culture. This is destroying the seams of our democracy. This is what's causing it, right? And you know what that does? That's a complete and total perfect dovetail with everything that Putin's been trying to push in Russia for the longest time, right? It's a corruption, right? Western values, the corruption. And again, it's what Dave Troy talks about. It's again, using traditionalism as a wedge. Obviously, this is what they're doing. And it seems really obvious once you start to think of it that way, and once you start to look at, authoritarian governments around the world, and what are the talking points for these authoritarian governments? What do people like Bolsonaro have to say? What do people they're all kind of marching in lockstep, because these global fascists like Steve Bannon are being they're having a lot of success in uniting the right. Right. They're having a lot of success, right? Nazis feel comfortable in America to show up to drag events or whatever's happening now, right? They feel comfortable telling people.
To the library, right? Yeah, exactly.
There's a ton of money in it too. Ron DeSantis uses this hate and does this because he's raising a lot of money off of it. So it was 100 million last time I checked. Now that he's still at it and still putting that fear out there and serving the people who are so extreme that finance him, I'm sure that he's increased his donations. And so it's very cynical. It's like what the January 6th committee showed us about Trump, and Trump using this whole big lie as a way to raise $250,000 for himself and his allies and whatever else for the Trump hotels and
litigation fund that didn't even
it's very, very cynical. So always, I know that when it seems to be so overwhelming because we're being hit on all fronts, if I follow the money, I can usually kind of see my way out of it and more clearly. And again, so many of the things that we talk about really do have fixes. They do. There are many things that we could do at this moment with bold executive orders. Yes, high five.
And actually, that was the one thing that I wanted to ask you, Jackie. So if we look at the psychology of America as a cybersecurity type of thing, and right now we're being hacked cognitively, right?
Yes.
I mean, this information is just hack after hack after hack of people who don't believe in science, who believe too much in religion, etc. How do we upgrade our system? How do we patch our system to stop these vulnerabilities?
It's really tough, right? Because you're talking about 10,000-year-old wetware, right?
Yeah.
This is really, really old software, right? And it's not getting upgraded fast enough at all.
It's looking at some lions and looking at
Yeah, look, I mean, I grew up with like marketing textbooks in the house because my mom, worked in that field. And so I had a sense of all of the psychological techniques and tactics that are used in the field of like marketing and just direct advertising to get people to do things, to modify behavior. I read an incredible book called Influence by Robert Cialdini. I recommend that to everyone. And again, it goes back to folks not really understanding how sophisticated these operations really are, not realizing that there are, again, like not just buildings full of regular people, but academics, people with PhDs who literally study brains for a living, who study behavior for a living, who are sociologists, psychologists, neuroscientists, right? Every different type of human related discipline that you can imagine, there are people out there who are being paid to kind of like hack our cognition. So what's the defense for Bannon's strategy of essentially flooding the zone with shit, as he says, right? How do you defend against that? One, you have to stop taking in all the shit. You have to stop responding to all the shit, right?
Yes.
And so how do you stop Tucker Carlson from broadcasting that evil into the minds of people? You can't, but you can maybe substitute it with something else.
Right.
And so this is what I was talking to you about, Heidi, last night, is the fact that there isn't a new MLK-like person. Who is this figure? Who is the figure that is going to lead us, right? We had JFK, we've had Lincoln, we've had MLK. Like when I think of the great people, we've had Rosa Parks, right?
Yes.
Like we've had people who have like an intrinsic, there's something intrinsic about them. There's a quality about them that engenders trust. And trust is what we're missing, right? When you think about like cybersecurity, I think of an incredible book that I read by a guy named Bruce Schneier called Liars and Outliers, the trust that society enables, the trust that society has that enables us to thrive, or something like that. And the point of the book is going into the kind of the unconscious thought processes that we have every day that rely on our deep trust in our society to function so that we are okay, right? Like when we cross the street, we literally rely on people to stop at the red light because we trust that they'll do it, right? We're all kind of in this together, and we all kind of share the rules of the road. And so we have to make decisions about how we're going to treat people who run those red lights. Right. What does it mean? How do we impose cost? That's what we talk about in the cybersecurity community. How do we increase the cost for attackers to come after us? How do we make it harder and harder for like internet research agency trolls to get an op-ed in one of our top 10 newspapers? Do you know what I mean? It's hard to do. It's hard to do, but it requires awareness. And again, I think the substitution would be really helpful, to have someone again who can provide that bottom line up front and who can really cut through that. I think AOC is a clear example of someone who's able to do that pretty powerfully. She's my congresswoman in New York City in the Bronx. I love her, but I just don't think she, with the look that she has, again, a look that's similar to mine, being like, I'm half Indian, half Dominican. So like Hispanic Indian, right? Just very like similar to Kamala. Just a look that most Americans can't really empathize with. They don't really see themselves when they're looking at someone like me, right? America needs to see someone again that transcends that racial line, that transcends that gender line, where everyone can see that this is an inspirational figure and that we trust them and that they're leading us to a better future. And I don't see that. You know, I was disappointed because I heard Joe speak the day that the Supreme Court decision was released regarding Roe v. Wade. And I thought his speech was very good. And I thought it covered all of the points. He even talked about period apps and how they might be leaking data.
Yeah, it's important.
Surveillance is a problem, right? He talked about privacy, he mentioned privacy multiple times. But what are we really seeing besides the speech? I don't know what it is. I don't see a concrete response. I don't see the posters that I saw of Obama promising change. I don't see the symbolism. Where's the symbolism? And the symbolism that I see is fascist symbolism. That's what they're going to go to, because when you have a whole country full of young men who don't know what it means to be a man anymore in the new 2022, what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be masculine? How can I be a man without being toxic? How can I hit on a lady without being toxic or harassing her? Right? Like no one, like I hear a lot of this online where boys don't really have those role models that allow them to feel like they know what they want to be in life. And so what they do is they're psychologically perfect fodder for terrorists.
Wow.
Right? As a person who was overseas in Iraq for years.
Right.
That's just how it was, right? As disaffected youth, they see an insurgency in their country. They see the military there, and they pick a side, right? And which side is more attractive? The side with the better incentives, the side with the better, the side that appeals psychologically, the side that says you have a family here, we're going to protect you here, you're part of a gang here, you're part of something, you're part of a solution, we're going to make things better, right? That's what I don't see. And so when we talk about Antifa, you know, I have a joke up on Twitter. I call myself the Chief Information Security Officer at Antifa.
Right.
Where there's no Antifa corporation, right? I just love saying stuff like that.
They think you're serious. Oh my God, it's amazing.
It's provocative. But it's meant to be provocative. It's meant to make people think. Like maybe we actually do need an Antifa. Right, because the U.S. military used to be Antifa. I was in the U.S. military. Okay, that's an anti-fascist organization. Period. Right. Well, there's some kind of confusion going on across all of America, where suddenly World War II was forgotten. And everyone has forgotten what a Nazi is. And they're falling back in with Nazis because it's giving them a feeling of belonging. And that's what we have to.
It started in Russia with the whitewashing of Stalin too. Putin did it 20 years ago to Russians, and it's come all the way to our country and other countries. Wow, you just gave us some really very important, tough medicine. We're out of time, but two things. I don't see why it couldn't be a woman of color to actually lead this revolution. I think that America may just need that to make it happen, but is
America ready? I'm not sure America is ready.
I'm ready, but I'm from California. I'm from San Francisco and LA, and we might think differently than perhaps.
It's a big step. Was Hillary ready? Probably. Is Kamala ready? Probably. Right. These are big, huge incremental steps. Are we sure that Kamala is ready? You could ask 10 people on the street that, and most of them would say no. Right.
But there's also a full-time campaign. Like Hillary got Hillaried. Kamala's getting Hillaried.
She did.
It's like
she did.
All these
Aaron
people
got herded. She got depped.
But the last thing I want you to say before you go, and promise you'll come back, please.
I will.
You said something very important about the judicial coup, and I'd like you to leave us with some thoughts about that, because we have beliefs that there is something that can be done, but first is acknowledging what it is.
Well, we are a country of laws. We're a nation of laws. We're a nation of laws, and it became very important for me to understand what that meant when I worked for the Task Force for Business and Stability Operations in Iraq. And this is a Pentagon project run by Deputy Undersecretary Paul Brinkley to help improve state-owned enterprises, to bring in foreign investment into Iraq, and just to just help make things better, right? Without having a U.S. focus. Just a really good project that I worked on, economic revitalization. And during this time, I just came to realize that, I have to try to collect my thoughts because it's been a long time since I thought about these things. If the question is about our country disintegrating because we were unable to maintain rule of law, you know what I mean? That's really what I see.
Yes.
And that was the understanding that I developed in Iraq, was that the rule of law and the agreement that we all have with each other to maintain that rule of law as a society is actually what binds us all together and what keeps us from just being monkeys flinging poo at each other. Right? Mm-hmm. Like we have a structure, and we have a system, and we have incentives. We have incentives to follow the law, and we have disincentives to break the law. I think we need to just go back to that. And instead of focusing so much on order, we need to focus more on justice.
Yes.
Right? We're so focused on order to the exclusion of justice that it's keeping us from being able to progress. And then the other thing we talked about last night, Heidi, was the fact that we have to face head on what we are as a country, what has happened to us as a country, what the outcomes of the last few years have been. And more than that, we need to look back to slavery. We need to admit to slavery. We need to we need to admit it. We need to get to the point where, like any German in the street who is asked about World War II, who can give a very clear-headed and clear-eyed understanding of their own understanding as a citizen of what happened in their country, and how something like that can never happen again, and what are the steps that they've taken as a country to prevent that from ever happening again. right? And how do they maintain that? I think we need to get to that point as a country. I want to be able to stop another citizen in the street and say, tell me about slavery, what happened, and for their breath not to catch in their throat, and for them to be able to tell me the story of what happened and how we got past that as a country. Because if we can never face the ugliness, we can never get past it. And that's really the sticking point that we're on right now. As our demographics are shifting, we need to be able to admit what happened, and we need to be able to say, we used labor unfairly, okay? And now we're going to do the right thing to spread the fruits of our labor around a little bit more. We're not talking about communism. We're not talking about socialism. We're a capitalist country. We can maintain that.
We're talking about decency.
We can maintain that. We're talking about decency.
That's right.
Okay? And kind of decentralizing, because we have created so many unaccountable centers of power that we're losing control over our own nation as citizens, right? And so that really, it just ties into kind of the rule of law. We've got to be able to respect the rule of law. We've got to all agree on what those rules and laws actually are. And as it stands, 75% of the United States does not agree with the major decision that the Supreme Court made last week. If more Americans understood what the impact of EPA versus West Virginia would be, there would be people potentially rioting in the streets, right? Especially people that have kids and grandkids. It's a total nightmare for our country. We are in the middle of a fascist takeover, right? And the Supreme Court is leading that charge, and they will continue to lead that charge until they are stopped. And President Biden has said that he will not commit to packing the courts. He refuses to go down that path. I think that's a mistake for the administration. I think we should absolutely be packing the courts as Truman threatened in the 1930s and 1931, I believe.
That's right.
The Social Security the Social Security Act, which, the Supreme Court justices threatened to veto that. Well, you know what? We're going to pack the court. And so we kind of have to go back to a time where Democrats feel confident making big decisions to lead the nation forward. That's where we got to go.
Yeah. Play hardball.
Mic drop.
We got to play hardball.
Oh, my God.
Hey, I got one final thing to say, and it's not a question. It's just, Jackie, there was one time when I needed my ass kicked and you kicked my ass. And thank you for that.
I'm sorry, I don't remember it.
I do, and thank you. I knew it, I deserved it, and you gave it to me, and I appreciate it.
Right on. Right on.
High praise.
We need tough medicine. I mean, we do. And I just want to thank you so much for coming on our show and for dropping your knowledge. And
it's fantastic.
There's so much to think about, and we're so grateful to you. And please come back when Jim can be here.
That sounds good. I love it. I love you guys.
Thanks,
thank you all so much.
We love you more.
I'll be back anytime.
Wonderful.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Wow. I nominate Jackie to be the person to write this course. I just think she's incredible. She's brilliant. Wow.
She's a hell of a warrior too. She's
wow.
Yes.
Incredible.
Yep.
I didn't realize her military background. Yeah, she's amazing.
Yeah, she is. And that's why I really am grateful that we had the time just to let's just breathe into it and give her the time and the space to actually share her knowledge. And I'm so glad she was here with us. I'm emotional as usual because Jackie just gave us quite a sweeping, list of things that we need to do and we can do. And I just love how clear-eyed she is on what the priorities are. So I'm really looking forward to sharing this with our viewers. And I know
kick in the ass. High-five, yeah.
I know we don't have a digital descent per se, but if we have time, I would love to I put it in the rundown. I'd love to show a little bit of our friend and our patron, Gail Ann Hurd's new film. It's The YouTube Effect, and Alex Winter, our friend from Bill and Ted, directed it. And so if you don't mind just showing a few seconds of that, I think it's very important we draw people's attention to this very, very important documentary. Our friend Gail is known for things like Terminator. She's known for things like Alien. I think it was Alien 2 and The Walking Dead, where she's the EP. But doing documentaries is a big part of her passion. And she did a very important documentary about something that we should all be looking at much more closely, and that is algorithm.
Right.
feels?
Kind of felt good, didn't it?
I'm Brookers, and I'm an internet celebrity.
How's it going?
Here's finally a service where if you want to get a political message out there, if you want to get some kind of message out there,
I fell down the alt-right rabbit hole.
You can use this platform. You're not going to be able to turn on the TV and be able to see this.
Google will pay $1.6 billion to gobble up YouTube.
There was no doubt in my mind that this was a huge trend of the future.
Everything on YouTube changed when the recommender algorithm was introduced.
It's not just algorithmic, it's very deliberate.
Now we're in this sort of misinformation apocalypse.
This is just made up. Go online and look it up.
I don't agree that it is just a reflection of society. It's changed society.
If we don't figure out this problem, we're going to lose what it means to be human.
Whoa, information apocalypse.
Watch that shit.
Oh my God, you know, we're going to lose what it means to be human. And this is the core of our show and what we're trying to save. It's democracy, but it's also our humanity. It's the beauty. It's the seeking beauty that you talked about. What a show. Let's go ahead and wrap it up so we can get this off to our viewers because everybody needs to hear Jackie.
That's right. See you guys.
Love you guys. Mwah.